Hello. In this video, I'm going to review three major ways of solving quadratic equations. So again, there are three major ways. Probably the first one you learned was factoring. Then you learned the miraculous quadratic formula. And then probably square roots, which people seem to forget about all the time, but it's a nice and easy one. So let's start with factoring. Main idea, get one side equal to 0, factor, and then set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Now you probably remember from Algebra 2 that there are many different ways to factor. For right now, we're just going to stick with the most basic. So here's an example. Let's say we have x squared minus x equals 12. First thing we'll do is get one side equal to 0. So let's subtract 12 from each side. So let's see, x squared minus x minus 12 equals 0. And so then we're going to factor. So that means I'm looking for what multiplies to negative 12 and adds to negative 1. And looks like negative 4 and 3 will do the job. So I have x minus 4 times x plus 3 equal to 0. I've factored. Now I'll set each factor equal to 0 and solve. And this step you probably are doing in your head at this point, but I'll write it here anyway. So that gives us x equals 4 and x equals negative 3. So those are our two solutions, 4 and negative 3. Now sometimes factoring won't work for you, so you're going to turn to the quadratic formula. So the first step for using this is that you'll write it in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So that's standard form. X squared comes first, followed by the linear term, followed by the constant term, and one side is 0. And then fill in the quadratic formula and just simplify. And there is that famous quadratic formula. If you don't have it memorized yet, get it there. Google it, find a song, get it memorized. So here will be an example. Once again, there's that quadratic formula. So let's get in standard form. I'm going to move that x squared. I'm going to add it to both sides to have x squared minus 2x plus 3 equals 0. So that means my a must be 1, my b is negative 2. Remember the negative sign comes with it, and my c is 3. So coming over here to plug in, negative b becomes 2 plus or minus square root. Negative 2 squared is 4. Be careful if you use your calculator here and type in negative 2 squared, it's going to tell you it's negative 4. You need parentheses around the negative 2 to show it's actually 4. Minus 4 times a is 1 times c is 3 all over 2 times a. So let's simplify. So now it's going to be 2 plus or minus square root 4 minus 12 over 2, which becomes 2 plus or minus square root negative 8 over 2. So we see that negative underneath the radical, and that tells us that we're going to have imaginary solutions here. So as soon as I see that, I'm going to think to myself that what I really have now is 2 plus or minus I radical 8 all over 2. So that negative under the radical becomes radical negative 1 becomes I. So I'm going to simplify now that radical 8, and that's 2 plus or minus 2I radical 2, because radical 8 is 2 radical 2, because it's the same as radical 4 times 2, which is 2 radical 2. Anyway, that's all over 2. Now I'm looking for what I can simplify. So in terms of what I can simplify here, you may have been taught before to think of the chip, to think about simplifying these three numbers here. So I can divide all of those by 2, which is going to give me 1 plus or minus I radical 2 over 1. I don't really need that 1, so I can leave this as 1 plus or minus I radical 2. And those are my two answers. Okay, square roots. So much more straightforward than quadratic formula, so I'm always surprised when people don't use this. So first of all, use this if you have no linear term. Remember, the linear term is the one. Here's an example. Say you have this one. So here's the squared term. This is the linear term, the one that has just x with no exponent on it other than 1. And then, of course, 5 is your constant. So if we have no linear term, square roots is a good way to go. So the method is to get the squared term and the constant on opposite sides, split them up, and then take a square root of both sides. Here's an example. So when I look at this, I see no linear term, so that's good. So I'm going to get the squared term, and I'm going to get the constant on opposite sides. So I'm going to subtract, oops, how do I keep doing that? So then I'm going to subtract the 5 from both sides, and so I'll have 8b squared equals 216. Now, a mistake people make sometimes, they want to take a square root right here. Don't do that if you've got this coefficient here. Go ahead and divide it out first. So when we do that, we do 8 dividing by 8 on both sides. We'll have b squared is equal to 27. So now I'm ready to take my square root on both sides. And that gives me b equals, don't forget, positive or negative, radical 27. But I look at radical 27 and I can simplify. So I'll have positive or negative radical, let's see, that's 9 times 3, equals positive or negative radical 9 radical 3 equals positive or negative 3 radical 3 are my two solutions. You don't have to show all those steps in there. I just wanted to run through them in case you needed a quick review.